If you have not become a patron of the Geocache Talk Network, what are you waiting for? Patron levels start as low as a Bison Tube level at $3 a month. To sign up is easy. Simply go to the Geocache Talk website and click on the Become a Patron button, or go to patreon.com/Geocache Talk. Patrons now get the famous Blackout coin, invites to special events, and other really great items throughout the year. Become a patron today. Have you subscribed to FTF Magazine yet? FTF Magazine is the #1 geocaching magazine available. It is a quarterly magazine that you can be part of. Submit your geocaching milestones and adventures to be published. FTF Magazine is also interactive with puzzles to solve and the hunt to find Spartacus. If you can solve the puzzle or find Spartacus, then you will be entered in to win a special pack tag. Every new subscription, you will receive a special swag pack. Subscribing is easy. Just visit FTF's website, ftfgeo.com. Don't miss out and subscribe today.
Hello, and welcome to Challenge Talk, part of the Geocache Talk Network. We broadcast live on the first Thursday of each month. Feel free to jump over to YouTube or Facebook to watch the broadcast live and join the wonderful and active chat room, or listen to the entire show in your favorite podcast player.
Hi, in this episode, we'll be chatting with a challenge-hardened volunteer community reviewer, asking him questions on all he knows about reviewing challenge caches and interpreting the guidelines. We'll also have prizes to give away each show to our listeners. Between each show, be sure to email your challenge cache finds to challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com, and you could be a winner.
And later in the show, we also play our special game exclusively for our live audience, the Wheel of Challenges. So listen live, get your email app ready, and follow instructions when the time comes so you can have a chance at winning the grand prize, a 1-year membership to Project GC. We are your hosts, Emily and Geoff from Cache the Line.
Hello.
And you can email any of your challenge caching questions, big or small, once again, to challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com. We might show them and chat about them on the air. First of all, want to give a quick shout out to Ipsimom, who has sent some feedback, and she has said, "I'm tuning in for the first time tonight. I missed the live show, so I set the bell to be sure to catch the next one. I'm loving the Cache Talk. See you next time." Ipsimom, a.k.a. Melody from Michigan in the USA.
Welcome.
Yes,
Love it.
First-time listener last month. So I hope you're listening this month again. It's great to hear from people who listen to the show. We love to have your feedback and hear especially what you like and don't like, what you want to see, comments and ideas. But mostly, we'll have to hear about your challenge caching adventures.
Yes. And it's so much fun when you're in the chat. So we love it when you listen live and join us in the chat. And we still love it if you listen later. We love all our listeners.
Yeah, for sure. So first off, we have a guest tonight, but we're going to jump into that in a moment, because the first thing we always like to do is discuss all of the new updates to the Project GC statistics, because on their website they have a little box that shows all of the counts of their challenge checking quantities and stats. And so we'd like to run through what has changed since last month. And as of September 2nd, about late this afternoon, there are now 6,761 active scripts. And those are the things that handle all of the challenge checkers that people use on geocaching.com. And that's up from 6,634, or 127 more than last year. So that could be anything from new challenge ideas that haven't been scripted yet to maybe some fixes, copies of scripts and adjustments and things like that. But in any case, that's more scripts to handle more challenges. We have 37,575 unique challenges, so those are different parameter sets. That's up 272 since last month. Those are individual challenge ideas where there could be multiple GCs that all use the same parameter set, so identical challenge caches. So these are the unique challenge ideas. As for unique challenge caches that are tagged in the system, unique GC codes, there's 45,933, which is up 411. And that includes archived caches, as far as I know. That's not just active. That's everything in the system. Because the search if you search for the challenge cache attribute on geocaching.com, that shows that there are 31,858 active challenge caches worldwide by attribute search, and that's up 164. So we're
Good.
still going up.
And we have in the chat that Kitty Catch has 3 new challenges in progress. So we'll continue to see our numbers rise. Thank you.
We don't get to see how many are in the development stages.
Right. But we're glad to hear you're doing it.
Yeah, I probably guess there must be at least a couple hundred, maybe a few hundred more that people are still working on and have yet to get published.
Sure.
Which could be an interesting topic for a reviewer to respond to. But if we run through some quick little news items since last month, one huge announcement coming from since August is the announcement of Cashfest 2022. And it is now a mega event.
Yes, it went mega quickly. I'm very excited about this. So many people were on board. I think it's going to be a great location, easy location for a lot of people to get to. I think that really helped. Go mega.
Yeah. And that's in Memphis, Tennessee, July 16th or that weekend, as typically happens with mega events. There are so many things to do. And there's pre-event coins you can purchase that are electric guitars in very Memphis style.
Right.
And there are events being planned from Wednesday to Sunday. So there's 6 days, including that weekend. And
including our Challenge Academy.
Exactly. We've got 3 different major segments of the event that will be happening. There's the Gadget Academy, the Puzzle Academy, and the Challenge Academy, which if you listen to the Geocache Talk Network, they're very similar to the shows.
That is true.
So lots of information. You can find loads of that on cashfest.com, www.cashfest.com. And the GC code, once again, is GC9E5GX. Make sure you get your will attend posted so that we know who's coming and can plan accordingly. That's going to be an awesome week.
We got a little wish for you. Fingers crossed our Canadian friends can attend.
High hopes by next year will be.
Oh, my goodness, I know. It's been too long.
We also have a little bit of an update because the souvenir promotion Reach the Peak has moved into its 2nd month. We are now into Mount Vinson. It's starting on the 6th, which is Monday. And the number of points that you need to reach the peak of Vinson is 4,892. I believe last month it was 4,882. The amount of feet US. Now the amount of feet to the peak of what was it? The month
Punchak Jaya
from last month. Yes.
I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Punchak Jaya. And and it's true. So we kind of predicted this. Every month the qualifying points or the requirements to earn points to qualification could change. In this case, the point values didn't change, but the what you need to find did. So last month it was finding multis, mysteries, earth caches, adventure labs, and any find counted for points as well. Now they're pretty much promoting the most finding a cache with 10 or more favorite points.
Yes.
And then points for earth caches, adventure labs, multis, mysteries, and of course points for any find.
Yeah. So did you reach the peak, Geoff?
Oh, yes.
Did you try very hard?
Well, not really. I think this is, again, one of those types of challenges that is great for people who don't necessarily cache as much. But if you go out and you're doing it weekly or especially daily, then you probably won't have much problem at all, even just with your base number of finds.
Right.
But what I love about some of these types of challenges, the souvenir promos, is the theming. Mm-hmm. And with this one, it really excited me to see the climbing mountains as the theme, reaching the peak. And it just so happened that one cache that I went to for August was essentially reaching the peak, and it was reaching the high point of Ontario, which really isn't all that high.
But still,
yeah.
that's awesome.
So it was it was fun to do to find some things that were related to the theme of the souvenir challenge. Did you reach the peak?
I did reach the peak. I was a little worried because I wasn't planning on overly caching. I really have to save caches because I'm cached out. But I cached an area without limitation, and I definitely reached the peak and beyond, and still have plenty left for traveling in opposite directions for future months.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, let's ask our special guest. This is an Ontario reviewer, and he has come out of the shadows to speak with us tonight. It is CacheShadow, aka Roy.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening, and welcome.
Hello. Did you reach the peak in August?
I did indeed. I've found myself to be a bit of a souvenir hound, just because at one point you wake up and realize you've got a lot of them, and then you figure, well, have you got this far? So yes, I did a veritable caching run because I don't normally log all my finds, and so I make exceptions for souvenirs, etc., etc.
Oh, cool.
And so I got that last night. Actually, I dragged my wife out for a drive because it was a nice evening.
Right.
Look over there, honey. Let me just pull over here. So yeah, good to go.
Good.
Excellent.
Good. I'm a sucker for the souvenir challenges. I really am.
Yeah.
And has there ever been one before, other than maybe like what do they call that? Wonders of the World. It kind of morphed, I feel like. I don't know. But like specifically from the start, they say you have 6 months. It resets every month, and you can only get the final if you've done your monthly task.
Yeah, I think
I don't think that's been one
the
like
reset
this
thing
before.
was one of those. I got to do what by when?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right. Don't
okay.
miss it, or you have missed the end souvenir. Right. I'm not sure we've seen that before.
Yeah, and to Jeff's point, though, it motivates folks who might not have been that, hardcore for a while, and at the same time, it motivated me to make sure that I planned to find those multis and mysteries.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just a case of let's go and do a dozen trads. Oh, if I just do this or this. So it was probably one of the most invigorating ones I've done in a while. So
good.
Points for that.
So in a way, it was convincing you to do a little less work because instead of finding 5 traditionals, you could find 1 multi.
Yeah, but it depends on whether or not the cache is at the end, right? So so I had my backups ready to go, but I was very happy with it.
Mm-hmm. And as for the resets, I think at this scale, I think definitely there hasn't been one this long, like 6 months. But there was there have been souvenirs where if you miss one that you can't get later, then you don't get the bonus. There was the streak week challenge. That one, you don't get the streak if you don't complete the streak, like 1 cache a day. And I'm pretty sure there were a couple others where if you didn't find something in the series during that period, then you wouldn't have earned the bonus. But yeah, of this scale, I think it's a lot more accessible because it's a full month for everybody. The chances of somebody not being able to get a peak somewhere fairly slim.
Yeah, and I like that it's a case of I wonder what this one's going to be. Oh,
exactly. We had to wait. Yeah.
So give them points.
I have a geocaching vacation at the end of the month. I was very curious. What is my activity going to do to help me? Yeah.
Well, our topic for this month, for this show, is, of course, challenge caches and ask a reviewer. And asking CacheShadow all of your, or some, whoever decided to send in questions, some of your questions regarding challenge caches. And I think we all know how controversial, maybe?
Let's say polarizing.
Polarizing.
The guidelines for challenge caches are, especially since the moratorium. So having sent in some, having made some posts asking for people to submit questions, we have got a few that we can raise and chat about. Some of them probably fairly simple. Some of them maybe more difficult to agree with, but that's the fun of it. we will be adding to the show notes the link to the guidelines that are specific to challenge caches, and that's in section 212, 2.12 in the geocaching guidelines. And I mean, that guideline list pretty much shows everything you need to know, but there's always questions. There's
course.
always ifs.
There's always someone with an alternative viewpoint.
And you can never cover everything either. Somebody's always got a new idea, something that skirts the guidelines, and I know I've been there. But let's start off with one of the questions. This was a good one to start off with. It came in from Lynn, and she has asked, are reviewers in charge of deciding the challenge guidelines? What say you, Mr. CacheShadow?
Well, challenge guidelines, or guidelines in general, Geocaching HQ, they are the keepers of the guidelines and the help center. So those are your core reference, but there are articles in the guidelines that refer to regional policies. So the bulk of the guidelines that we have today were brought into play in May of 2016, which was after the 13-month moratorium. So HQ put together the revised guidelines using feedback they gathered from the community during the moratorium, and that was player feedback, bearing in mind that lackeys and reviewers, they're also players. So they invited discussions, they asked for feedback sessions, they put stuff together, and they had various iterations that they floated within the community. And even since that first release in 2016, there have been various tweaks ever since. So HQ, they are the keepers of the guidelines. However, as I was saying, regional reviewers or reviewer teams may have a wiki page for regional geocaching policies that might clarify certain items for guidelines, which are as they were interpreted regionally. But HQ, they are the keepers. And one of the challenges, pun intended, is the subjectivity with challenge caches. There's always been a bit of a speed bump with consistency, because people might say, well, how come this was okay here, but it's not okay here? Well, the games play differently in different regions based on how the community hides caches, finds caches, etc., etc. At the end of the day, reviewer interprets the guidelines as best as they can from HQ, and if there's a difference in opinion between a player and the reviewer, that's why there's the appeals team.
Yeah, the regional thing is another question, because there are guidelines, but then there are some differences from area to area. Because Ontario is kind of a hot spot. We've got loads of challenges. I haven't looked at to see what kind of challenge landscape there are in other regions, but I know that there's been a whole lot of development of challenge caches in Ontario, and controversy.
And a lot of the situations you encounter when you say controversy, is you only know about the things where you were told no. You never realize when you were told yes that it might be a situation that was a plus or an exception or regional allowance. So there might be something that's completely legitimate in region A because of how region A plays the game that might not be in B. And so you might feel like you left out. But at the same time, you might have something that you have published all the time that might not be allowed, whether it be some regions don't allow caches in trees. So you can take for granted what you have already. For the most part, the guidelines are helping the reviewer be consistent in their region, and work with your reviewer is about the best approach I can suggest.
So there is the official guidelines, and that's the one that's on the website that people can look up. And then there's regional specific guidelines, which you'll have to find your region's wiki page itself to find any changes. And
a lot of reviewers have updated those wiki pages. Some may not have enough content to warrant that wiki page update, but they'll be happy to provide it to you in a review. Essentially, when you're playing the game, work with your reviewer, and you'll work out quickly what the situation might be.
Yeah, you guys are there to help us.
Yes, the same way as folks compare their find counts, reviewers compare their publish counts. So at the end of the year, when there's a big spreadsheet comes out, and we're all sitting there going, "Oh, did I publish more than the other person?" we want that accolade. We want to be able to kind of beat our chest and say, yeah, I got more than the other guy on my team.
Oh, wow. Now that's an insider
And so,
tidbit there.
yeah, because of course, reviewers want to publish your cache. And
You took the words right out of my mouth.
and that's the thing, is they want it to happen, because the more green buttons there are, the better it is.
Awesome.
Well, the next question we have comes from Eric, and he asks, why can't we have a certain number of caches in a day challenges? I think this is one of those post-moratorium rules.
So this comes back to HQ make the guidelines. We follow them. So that's the short version. But there were several sections in the challenge guidelines that explain things as being acceptable and not acceptable. And one of those sections is the time limited section. And so HQ doesn't permit challenges such as find so many caches in a day or in a week. And it's a good question. Why was it made? I don't know. They gathered feedback. They looked at community feedback from an ongoing basis. But top of my head, there's no list to refer to say this is in place because of this reason.
Mhm.
But how would you keep track of people who would say, well, their day starts at 5 p.m. when they started caching, and it ended at 5 p.m. the next day when they stopped? It was 24 hours. It was a day. We don't have logging with that level of clarity. The same way as if you didn't log it on that particular day, it's a little more complicated. So do you see a day as starting at the stroke of midnight, or do you see the day as, you can see how the interpretations could come in. So I don't know what HQ's underlying reasons were specifically, but just off the top of my head, I can give you two right there. There was a reason.
Mhm.
So there are many other challenges that are allowed. The ones are not.
Yeah, I know that was one of the well, obviously, many of the rules that came after post-moratorium were controversial, but yeah, time limited. I have thoughts about some of the limitations, but they're general thoughts. We have a question in chat from Kyle, who has asked, does the reviewer receive notification if HQ review overrules a reviewer's prior decision on a challenge?
Let me see again. Reviewers get feedback, let's use that phrase, from HQ regularly. And it's invited and it's accepted. And so HQ can turn around and say, you know what, you didn't interpret that quite the way we anticipated. It happens. And it's great because we get a green button. So if you think of the appeals team and HQ as, if you approach them and they are your second best chance to get your perspective across, and if you truly believe your reviewer is interpreting something in a different way from the guidelines, they'll help. The reviewers are only human. It could be a coffee, a lack of sleep. It could be a whatever situation. They may not have interpreted your cache listing the way that you meant it to be, and perhaps your email to appeals express it differently in a more clear manner. Go through the effort. Get that second chance to make that best first impression. And so there are situations, obviously, where you can get told, oh, by the way, yeah, that's probably is going to be okay. Or if they tweak it in this manner. And so a lot of reviewers will encourage players, like, please do, if you have a question, if I cannot answer it, if I cannot help you, you do have another avenue to go to. And there have been a few times where I'll sit and someone has simply said to me, okay, let's start the conversation again. This is what I'm trying to do. And I realize what they're expressing. It might be one word different from what they've written in the cache page, and it changes the whole tone of the review.
Sure.
So again, reviewers want to press the green button.
Good,
So
thank you.
whatever it takes.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that reviewers like it when you appeal their negatives. It's like, yes, take it to appeals, please. I would like to know what the answer is.
Certainly.
So another question coming in from Fabian asks, what do you think about challenge caches being archived and then locked by a review?
Locked. All right. So there, HQ have given reviewers the ability to lock caches. So that's just explain the details of that. That's when a cache itself no longer take logs, whether it be from the cache owner, whether it be from somebody finding it, etc. So just to explain what locking it is. Geocaching is a regional game played globally. I can answer from my situation at this end in Ontario. There are times where there may have been a landowner issue. There may have been HQ has reached out to a reviewer and said, you need to lock this for reason X, Y, and Z. It may have been a police issue. It may have been a dispute going on. When you look at a cache page, you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. You don't know whether or not there's been a requirement or request to lock something. You can only make an assumption. So first thing is, you don't always know what's going on, so maybe the lock was warranted for some reason. The other side is, if there is a situation on the cache page or in the game taking place and a reviewer wants extra guidance from HQ, they may lock it and then approach HQ and ask for confirmation of how to approach. Each reviewer may act in their region in a different way, and whatever situation this is where it's been locked, I'm quite sure is warranted. There are times where there are guidelines compliance issues, and to prevent the bravado of logging that troublesome cache, we might lock something here at a request of somebody, because if, I'll give you an example, if there's a challenge cache placed somewhere where you shouldn't be, and we find out post-publish, then archiving it and saying, dispute with the landowner, they're really upset publicly on the cache page. Not a smart idea, because folks might think, oh, let's go poke the bear. So if you discourage it, maybe that's a course of action. So I'm quite sure that in those situations, it's been locked for a reason. And again, that depends on where it's occurred. So not being able to speak to every single example of that. If it's happened for a reason. The other side, reviewers are very efficient. If they don't have to click a button, they won't. And it's an extra button. So there's typically justification for it.
And A&K has raised the other point with locked archive challenges. In a situation where someone finds the physical container of a challenge cache but doesn't meet the criteria yet, when they do, the cache is archived or locked, can they still claim the find?
If it's archived or locked, then nothing else happens on the cache page, which is unfortunate if you have found the cache and noted it. But thankfully, there are plenty more smileys out there to be had in the world.
So it's just a risk to go do a challenge trail that you don't qualify for yet.
It's part of one of the nuances of a game based on using a GPS to go find something, sign a log, and go back and celebrate, having an aspect where you have to jump through a hoop before you celebrate. Yes.
That's a good point.
That's great. Jump through a hoop before you celebrate.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've often said that's great about challenge caches is they get you doing things in order to, accomplish something. And then the challenge cache that you find and sign to commemorate that is one commemoration of the fact that you've accomplished it. So if you have found and are working towards qualifying for that cache, if you can't sign that one because it's archived and locked, another one could pop up and you can just go find it and sign it, because you've already accomplished it.
Yes,
So,
I would add to that, the point at which you finish your first grid, or the point at which you finish your Jasmer, or the point at which you did your 365 Ironman, do you celebrate that and tell folks, oh, I found GCABC123? Or do you say, I got my Jasmer?
Right.
So
Right.
do you necessarily need to have found that cache and sign that log to know you're pretty awesome? Subject to interpretation.
yeah.
That's a really
And
good
hey,
point, because often I have accomplished something and there's no cache to go along with it, but I am still proud. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you really want to, you could create a bookmark list and bookmark all the archived locked caches that you found.
There you go.
And then just
Look at it
buffer your finds.
longingly. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, we have a really important question in the chat. Reviewers are real?
No,
They're really
Dave should know.
So another one coming in from John. He says basically dealing with challenges was consuming all of the reviewers' time. So this is after a reviewer panel. They were commenting about how dealing with challenges was consuming all of their time, and that is why they were banished. So I'm happy that they are back, and I try not to give a reviewer any trouble with them. So how would you respond to the amount of time that's spent on challenge caches versus everything else?
Bearing in mind that we are in a very challenge-centric zone here in Ontario, prior to the moratorium, it was a lot more effort required dealing with the nuances of different challenges versus after the moratorium. So prior to April 2015, when the moratorium was enacted, it was far more subjectivity was involved. And hats off, because as part of the new guidelines since May of 2016, we have that requirement with Project GC and the challenge checkers. So hats off to the folks that write the scripts, because they became almost like a first line of validation. Because if a challenge script author said, that's never going to fly, it never made its way to the reviewer. And you get to the point where someone can be given a little bit of a nudge as what could be made reviewable. Not saying that they're perfect on every single script, because there's no way they can know. They don't deal with reviewing, but the challenge checker authors have done a fantastic job of kind of stopping that first initial wave of things that were tougher to review in the past, because it wasn't just a case of it would be tough and questionable. There's to be so many of them. People would create challenge caches just for the sake of creating challenge caches because they wanted to own one. So I think a lot less time is spent now than it used to be. And at the same time, the guidelines have changed with their acceptable, not acceptable list. It's really made it a lot clearer for folks. And so it is not as tough as it was before. However, the game progresses and the players progress and the creativity keeps going, so it still keeps folks on their toes. But I'm happy to say it's not all time consuming. We certainly, at least in our region of Ontario, are very happy at how folks have embraced the new challenge guidelines and how people have embraced placing caches in general, challenges or not.
Great. So you really have an insider view on the evolution of creativity, because that's the way I look at these guidelines, is how can I take this fact and make it interesting, make it not about the fact itself. I really enjoy when people can add a concept that you would have never guessed to match a guideline.
It's very fun when somebody comes up with something new and you think you're the first one to see it. And yes, granted, one of the sides with Project GC and the checkers is people see the challenge checkers and go, oh, I can do that locally. But to be the person that makes that first challenge, it might get lost in the mix at the player end or at the community end. But I certainly do see people making the effort. And we've seen some great things. I wish they were all publishable. But at the same time, some of the things that appeal to me as a player because of my history and what I found in the game, or what I personally find interesting, may not appeal to many other people, certainly might be almost turn away new players. So there's that balance. And the balance, I think, is where a lot of the guidelines try to steer people, as a balance between making sure your challenge appeals not just to the folks who are quote unquote on the elite end of the scale, but to people who want an ambition to aim for.
Right.
And that list in the guidelines of what makes an acceptable challenge is super helpful as well, because there are specific ideas, like how to interpret attainable or time limit. They explain what is allowed, but then give some examples of what people have had published previously or asked and now are denied. So, and these are most common, but like you said, there are people that come up with ideas that haven't been done before, and then it's kind of like, well, is it allowed or not? Because it's not on the list. So I've even found there's been a couple of times when I've had checkers made because they interpreted that, well, it's probably allowed. So they created it and it all works. It checks and everything. Go to publish and it gets denied because a reviewer has interpreted it differently than the script writer. So just because it can be scripted doesn't necessarily mean it can be published.
Mhm.
And at the same time, if you look in that page you're on, there's probably an update there from, I think, July 2021. So if you search for July, there's something in there where HQ do update the guidelines on a regular basis. And there's not necessarily a changes.txt that's in there, but things change maybe from one day to the next. So what may have been publishable yesterday, and they go red text, you just passed it.
Oh, the red text.
Or maybe publishable yesterday may not be today. And so the guidelines themselves, they're more of a living document, but it's not immediately apparent. So yeah, there can be situations where if you weren't aware of that change, you may not have got the memo. And so it's a living environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw this change mentioned and noticed that it was about using text for a challenge. And I do remember that this was part of the rule that was enabled as part of bookkeeping post-moratorium that wasn't allowed. But apparently, I guess that actual text wasn't in the guidelines, so people were still requesting it, perhaps. But yeah, using words or letters in titles or regions. Regions actually interesting.
Yeah. It's your interpretation, the subjectivity of the guidelines themselves, and all guidelines. It's a case of if everything had to say no, that would be a very long and complicated.
Right. And even I think it was you said before you showed that the changes, just because a script can be written doesn't mean it's allowable. And you see that in all those pre-moratorium caches.
Yes.
So many of them have a script that someone wrote to make our lives easier, but it doesn't fly in the present.
Yeah. Objectively, if you could write a script that says, is the cache on the moon? Yes, no. Right? But the technology is there to do it.
Yep.
Which Rich actually addressed in a comment. He says, relax the rules a little bit. If an automated checker can be written, then allow it. The checker has to handle anything required to qualify, so no more reviewer involvement than current challenges. I think his point is that, well, if the checker can be written, then
give it to me.
Why disallow the challenge?
Yeah.
Right. I'll give you a counterpoint on that one. So yes, but if we were to say for a moment, you made a private cache that only you and a few other people who found the same unique combination of caches had found. You place it in your driveway, those 4 people log it, nobody else logs it. So I've give an example, I found caches in 47 countries, I found caches in all US states, I've done this, that, and the other. If I were to create a challenge with a checker that would come back and say, has done what I've done, how many people would be able to log that in my region? And then if somebody else did the same thing, that's an awful lot of quote unquote private caches, with each one having 161 meter or 520 foot, 8 feet circle around them, consuming space on the playing field. So I think the guidelines are written in a way to help reduce the number of private challenges, so to speak. And granted, things can change as time goes on, because as people play the game for longer and longer, more people will naturally have a better record to help them meet those challenge qualifications. That might be a better point in time to submit those, in which the whole, well, if more people can do it, why is it a challenge? Yes, I appreciate the semantics of that. But at the same time, as I was saying, you don't need to find a cache to challenge yourself with a great concept that challenge authors come up with. So yes, it would be far easier if the rule was, if challenge checker exists, then good to go. Yes, absolutely. It would be much easier on the reviewer end. But on the player end, there might be a lot more places out there with caches that get very few visits.
Yeah.
And there's still the aspect of trying to figure out how to qualify or being able to qualify. It might be easy to check if you qualify, but that's only half of the challenge. You have to qualify. So, kind of follow up to that one from Lynn. She said, or asked, have you ever published a challenge even though you felt the challenge itself sucked, or denied publication of a challenge even though you loved the concept of it?
So prior to the moratorium, I saw numerous challenge caches that I thought were created just for the sake of the owner having a challenge cache. Like, it was just simply, they put it in the queue because challenge caches were this thing, and I'd like to have one too. The updated guidelines have seemed to encourage people to put more effort into the challenge caches. And again, let's not forget the folks at Project GC, who they kind of make folks take that step up. When you're told by your reviewer you need to have a challenge checker for your challenge, and you go to Project GC, they're filtering, they're adding a layer of, you'd like what? And so that's helped with some of the challenges, and it's really brought the quality up from my perspective, and makes sure things are compliant and the challenge themselves. But as for publishing things that I love the concept, yeah, that happens quite a lot. And that's again one of those times where a reviewer might say, oh, that's almost there. What if you did this? Then you could get it past that thing you're tripping over, and we could get that thing published for you. And yeah, there's certainly caches out there today which are slightly different from how they were originally reviewed or submitted for review, and the creativity was there, but there might have been one nuance about them that was in the not acceptable list. It's just a better feeling to hit the green button and say, we got to give you that customer service, folks are going to enjoy it. But there are certainly times like, oh, that's really a good idea. No, but that's a really a good idea. But you know what? You can't have it both ways.
What's your guidance from HQ on telling us, hey, shift a little and this could be a green light?
Reviewers are given encouragement to make sure that we do give players every opportunity to be able to resolve their own issues. There may be, again, regionally, that nuance that says, for example, if we in Ontario ask a certain number of qualifiers for a cache, we're fortunate in that we have an incredibly active community, and it's really not difficult to find qualifiers for most challenges. And so we may not necessarily need to make an extra step to try and help the cache owner find that 10th qualifier. Like, it's a pretty set list, it's easy. But at the same time, as if review is sitting there and someone's providing a challenge cache to them, they may be able to say to the cache owner, hey, there's some latitude here. Let's give you this nudge to be able to make this go out there. And HQ want us to provide the best we can within guidelines to be able to make the best experience for the players. So the guidance effectively is work with the players in the same way as we're asked players to work with the reviewers, because everybody wants to hit the green button.
Good.
Right. Well, there's another question that came in chat from KC11 who says, can challenges be created that involve adventure labs? For example, caches at the posted coordinates complete 100 adventure labs to claim the find.
Good
this
question.
Has come up quite a lot, I think.
See, this is another example with the challenge caches, is where things change. So I would go into the challenge cache page and I would search for the word adventure lab. So if you do the right now, you'll probably get your answer.
On a similar note, there was a comment that came in from Joe who said Project GC has the ability to check 360-degree challenges from GZ, not a cache's home coordinates. Not sure why this was disallowed under the new guidelines. So it's another type of challenge that is kind of unique, but why is it not allowed now?
So again, back to when HQ provide the guidelines, they don't necessarily have a list of why this is a not acceptable column. But if I look at it, if someone says to me the difference between the 360 challenge and, let's say, a challenge that requires caches in a province or a state. So guidelines have the criteria section, and I think that's where we say you shouldn't use coordinates or longitude and latitude, which is effectively what 360 challenge is, but it does say it's okay to have province or states or boundaries. If you have a cache today that's in location X and you move it 161 meters or 528 feet, chances are it's going to be within the same province, state, territory boundary. You are unlikely, it could happen, you're unlikely to make it not a qualifier for somebody who was only one cache away from finishing a challenge. If you have a 360 challenge, that tiny move potentially could move that cache out of being one of the qualifiers. Is that one of the reasons HQ chose? I'm not sure, but it's a pretty solid one off the top of my head of why something to do with things a cache owner can control in their cache page being integral to somebody else's qualifications. Let's forget difficulty in terrain for a minute. That's an entirely different animal.
I was just going to say.
Yeah, that might not be preferable. So I don't know specifically why not, but I can come up with some pretty good reasons why I might question it myself. And at the end of the day, we got an awful lot of things to work with, and we see challenges being published. So maybe it might be a grumble, but it might not be a showstopper.
It's another good example of a challenge cache style that is basically grandfathered. I don't think there's too many 360 challenges out there, but consider it like an oldie. It's a grandfathered challenge. They can't be created anymore. Better try to qualify and find it and sign it before it goes away. Right? It's like it's
that much more
it's just one
special.
of those things.
We made them special because they're rare, like virtuals used to be.
Right, used to be.
So another comment that came in from Scott, who has said, I think the terrain rating should reflect the actual height of the challenge. Do you, as a reviewer, make any comments about what you think, if you think the terrain might be a little off? Like if it looks like the cache is in a parking lot, but they've bumped the terrain to a 4.5 because of the challenge, might you make a comment about the terrain should be?
I'd refer to the guideline page you had up there, where at the bottom it says, we recommend that if difficulty rating be based on the challenge, the terrain rating be based on the cache location.
Yeah, right there. We recommend the difficulty. But you see, and that's the thing. It says we recommend.
Recommend.
So would you also
great?
recommend?
I would push it back. Again, semantics.
This is part of the fun of the back and forth with reviewers during the review process, right? Because if you're not sure of anything, you gotta ask, and then if they don't know, they'll ask, and it's conversation.
Just always imagine that point in the movie where they say it's like the pirate code. They be guidelines.
So Lenora suggests that to limit the time reviewers have to spend reviewing challenges, as in challenges have a lower priority for publishing and may take longer to be attended to. I think she's saying that if to make things easier for reviewers, if challenges were kind of given a second tier to other geocaches, would that make things easier?
Nowadays, with the revised guidelines since 2016, I'm not sure as much time is spent in all regions. I'm not saying that they're not still complicated, because challenges can be complicated in comparison to prior to the moratorium in April 2015. So I don't think there's as much of a problem with this as there once was. However, at the same time, when the reviewer goes through a queue, they may have an approach that works for them, whether that be the low-hanging fruit, whether that be events first. Well, it should be, because it's the most time sensitive. I don't think this would be an issue nowadays. In the past, potentially, pre-2015. But thankfully, with Project GC, with the revised guidelines, and really just with the experiences that we all have, bearing in mind that we aren't working in a vacuum, we can talk to our peers, we can ask each other questions, we can communicate with each other directly. We can all bounce ideas off each other. And that technology and that fluidity of communication is better today than it was 5 years ago. So the game is evolving, so are the reviewers, believe it or not. We're human too, and HQ support of us is always increasing. It is not a case of you are working with the reviewer and you're both in a vacuum. The reviewer has a support system, and the reviewer can lean on the support system. And thankfully, that gets better and better each day. So this shouldn't be an issue, hopefully, nowadays.
Great.
Your mileage may vary.
One other topic that has come up that I know has been raised in quite a few places is the controversy surrounding minimum requirements for a challenge to be published. And so Craig has said, finding 10 that qualify locally is not in the game's best interest. I feel the circle for those that qualify can literally be 300 miles or more.
I feel
was
the
kind of-
pain of this question.
It's in the context of the fact that so many people who love these challenge caches will travel great distances once they're qualified to come and sign and find that challenge cache. So, and I remember when the post-moratorium came, what if a challenge is published right near the border of a region when the people who would find it are right across the border? Why does it have to be, especially with Ontario being huge, we had to deal with that, find 10 people in the region to qualify. Why is it 10 people in the region and not, say, with the geocache as a center point?
And my region being so unpopulated compared to yours, it feels even rougher. Like, I don't want to be hiding reward challenge caches. I want to hide challenge caches. Give someone a challenge to work towards.
So this is another example of geocaching being a regional game played globally. And I'm going to get a t-shirt with that and maybe a trademark on it one day. So reviewers typically handle the regional community with the experiences they've had in that community. So they've seen enough caches to paint a picture of what works in a region. So in Ontario, our regional geocaching policies wiki, blah, 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 explains that we do also 10 qualifiers. So in Ontario, we will accept those qualifiers from anywhere in the province. So that's 1 million square kilometers. More than that, which means if you are in Toronto, big city, and you want to list a qualifier from Ottawa, 5 hours down the road, you can do that, which is easier to review, easier to understand, and really, I very rarely see challenges that come in that don't have qualifiers because if we've got this catchment area. But we've said in Ontario, just Ontario, which means, yes, if you are 100 meters over that bridge to Quebec, or you are 1 mile away down there to New York State, you can't use those challenge qualifiers. But if you have a metric, you're going to have a limit somewhere to define that makes it easier for people to work with. So our team chose Ontario as our local region. Works for us because at the same time, not all of Ontario is populated, and we have an awful lot of traffic that goes along this one corridor, the 401 highway, that folks will drive 5 hours for a cache and then drive back. That's just the way it goes. Maybe they drive that far for milk. I'm not sure. So if you're going to have boundaries, you're going to have metrics and measurements, you have to set them somewhere. There's no right answer that works everywhere. We have geocached, I think, nothing of that travel. So our approach here works because it's regional. Now, if reviewers elsewhere have a different approach, they've likely got a good reason for it being that way. Because again, reviewers want to publish things. So if you have a reviewer providing you a guideline, you may think it's a restriction, you can work with it. How many challenges are not getting published because of it versus how much more work as a cache owner do you have to go through to be able to prove those qualifiers? That's question one. The other side is reach out to the reviewer. You may not be asking them or trying to sway them or argue with them. You might say, hey, if ever you're going to be reconsidering how you look at these things, why not open it up a bit more to this? Provide your justification. Because you know what? They appreciate the feedback. I would not expect folks to change their decisions on a dime. Why? Because for every decision you change, there's a ripple elsewhere.
Yeah.
At the same time, they're all open to feedback because they want to work with the community that they've got, and they want to make sure that they've got their finger on that pulse. And things do change. They might not be the change you're looking for your challenge today, but at least they've got that information. So whatever your region is handling, or as far as a radius, or as far as a number of qualifiers, or not the number of qualifiers, you're getting reviewed by a regional reviewer in a regional manner. You cannot compare it to other regions, step one, but is it within the confines of the guidelines? And if the guidelines say your reviewer may ask you for 10 local or regional qualifiers, which I think they do, then that's probably the situation you're in, at which point I would work with, again, communicating with them and just expressing, hey, is this something that can be looked at? I wouldn't necessarily do that in my reviewer note during the review of my cache, because that might be a separate conversation. But it is something where I would personally provide that feedback politely and respectfully, so it can be contemplated. And maybe if enough folks do that, that might change the decision. It may not. There may be a very good reason why things are the way they are. Because again, we don't always see things in our little microscopic universe that somebody else might see from a slightly different position. So patience and understanding seems often to be a better approach than kind of rampant panic.
Yeah, for sure. There is one quick advice question from Casey11 in chat as well. Said, tried placing a challenge cache inside historical museum. Reviewer said not allowed. They are allowed with the manager's permission, right? Can't be traditional and no interaction with workers. Any advice on that one?
There is a page in the help center regarding caches that are indoors. And so I would follow that guidance. And again, there may be a regional approach to that. Typically, caches within buildings, they are often multis, because then we can ensure that there is GPS usage. So I would look at that guidance and approach the reviewer and say, how can I get this published? Or is there a way that you suggest that I reword this to make this publishable?
Yeah, because it seems like this is kind of in that little gray area, because it isn't a traditional and there's no interaction because it's a challenge cache. It's a mystery. But I guess even then, if you were to put the posted coordinates outside as a mystery and tell people to go inside, there's still really no GPS use. It's effectively a traditional inside the building, which could be one of the reasons. So there's a couple other little points I thought I would pass on to get your own thoughts. I think this one is one of the most common suggestions I keep seeing about challenge caches. What are your thoughts on challenges having their own icon?
Well, imagine for a moment that somebody says, there's a new icon. And everybody goes, oh, great. Let me take all my existing caches and challenges that are around me that already exist and are out there. Let's recreate them and get them a new icon. So that concerns me personally, because I'm like, oh, good. That's a reboot of that one, and that one. Second one is the mystery cache definition kind of already includes the, other thing bucket, which is what they are in. Even prior to the attribute, you could go in and do a search and a filter for caches that were mysteries who were challenge in the title, and you'd probably get 99% of them. So it's not a case of you have a hard time finding them, but the attribute really hits the nail on the head. So as far as another cache type, would you then be in a situation where a challenge that you've already qualified for, well, you don't want to change the cache type icon, because then you've invalidated all of the caches that you use the mystery cache icon for to find it, because you'd be changing them to a challenge cache icon. But if you kept all the existing ones that were challenge cache icons, which are mysteries, and then you give them it just really sounds very complicated to me personally. I'm sure that higher powers have thought about this and contemplated it, and we got an attribute. So I'm happy with the attribute. I didn't need it because I could search for word challenge and I could search for mystery icons, but it's certainly, I think, been beneficial. And that's pretty good. And I'm not sure we need more cached icons at all.
Yeah.
You kind of need two, right? You need a virtual and a physical.
And then just describe it well.
Yeah. Yeah. And and the thing is, the attribute has really addressed that. I think the biggest concern is that people either wanting to filter them out or filter them in or search for them explicitly. And the text was kind of a hack, for lack of a better term, having challenge in the title and being a mystery. It was kind of using the existing search options to adhere to a guideline rather than having something that says this is a challenge cache. And I think the attribute helped with that. Makes things a lot easier. With one other question, because there's all these challenges that can't be published, or you won't publish, or for whatever reason, there is this concept called unchallenges, and that is traditional caches with optional challenges. What are your thoughts on those? Do you have any recommendations about creating them?
I'll give you two views on those. I'll give you the standard one, and I'll give you the if I won the Powerball lottery one. So if you don't use the word challenge on a cache page, and you have an optional something or other for folks to say, yeah, I've done this thing, all the power to you. If you put Project GC checker on it, that would be really confusing because it looks, smells, and tastes like a challenge. It quacks like a duck. If I won an awful lot of money, I would show up at HQ's doorstep and say, listen, I've got this really cool idea. I'm 20 years too late. I'm really sorry you've built all this website and this app, but this is a cool idea. Let's just make it so challenges are a second layer of thing on top of geocaches. That's what I'd do. I would turn around and say, hey, if you find a container with a GPS device, you sign the log, and then you go home and you log the find, you get a smiley. That sounds a lot like geocaching to me. But when you get home and you find that you can't get the smiley because you didn't jump through that hoop, that sounds a little frustrating to me. So what if 20 years ago, there was a little box on the review page where the cache owner could say, to log this cache, you must have found a cache not on the moon or on the moon. And someone could write a Project GC checker for it. And all the reviewer has to do is say, there's no terms of use violation, there's no commercial stuff in there, no one's calling anybody names. That's good to go. Silly challenge? Yep. Don't care. There's a checker for it. And let's say for a moment that were published. And so the person sees the cache, it's a traditional, it's a multi, it's a whatever, they go out, they find the cache, they sign the log, they log the find. But when they log the find, they can click a little button that says, do you qualify for the challenge? And the challenge pops up and they go, yes, I do. And they click the project checker. It says, you qualify. Have one challenge pointy doodad trophy thingy. Way to go. I would have loved that because then you would have taken the subjectivity out of the reviews. You would have let anybody who finds a container, signs a log the find, aka geocaching, do it. And you'd also let folks come up with the most creative things they could. And I mean, some of them would be wacky and out in left and field, but the difference is that cache isn't taking up the spot on the playing field that no one else can ever play with.
Right.
That would have been really neat if I'd come up with that 20 years ago. At this point in time, can you just imagine what the costs would be in reality for redesigning
Yeah. Right.
And again, not everybody would like that. That's not a great exercise in customer service by any means. But I think that would have made a difference. And that would have been my approach. Instead, had I had the foresight, that ship has sailed. But I think a lot of that is going to change the difference in how people would have perceived things, which would have been a slightly different way of answering that question. But in a parallel universe, maybe we're all doing that. And Geoff's got a whole bunch of gold challenge trophy doohick thingies.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about that. If you're flipping it, so instead of an additional logging requirement, qualifying in order to be able to log it found, it's kind of the other way where you log it found in order to get extra points for qualifying for the additional challenge.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Because at that point, again, the reviewer's out of it because they're like, wow, that's completely out of left field, but there's nothing that's terms of use there. Have fun, challenge cachers. But however, the new player just started and there's a cache at the end of the driveway. In that green tree, you can go, I found this traditional.
I found it too. All types caching together. Yeah.
But that would have been lovely. But again, I'm 20 years too late. And I'm not the only one who's come up with that. Yeah, I'm not the only one who's come up with that idea, I'm sure.
Well, I haven't heard it before, but it's good. I like, yeah.
But we have the game that we have today, and the community have really driven the game in such a positive way. And if it wasn't for the community, there wouldn't be a revision in guidelines. The challenge caches wouldn't be as popular. This channel wouldn't exist right now, and we'd have the conversation. So if it weren't for all those folks working together, and yes, there are times where people get to say, I'm sorry, you don't qualify. There are times where things get kicked back, but I'm quite sure that's in the minority. It's a game that gets people out there. And yes, there may be situations where someone does find a container, they do sign that log, and they can't log the find. But that also might be the spark that makes them go, well, I do want to log that find. What do I need to do?
Right. The spark. Exactly. Someone said clear back in the beginning of the show in our chat. The challenges were a spark for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got one more question in the chat. It's not about challenges, but I think along our topic of ask a reviewer, everyone has this question at some point or another. Hypothetically, say you feel you somehow got on the bad side of a reviewer, what can you do to come back, or is all hope lost? Is this a regional question? A regional answer?
Well, you know what? We could just ask Geoff. I think that if you truly believe that you've done something that has offended somebody, you can ask them, hey, are we good? Maybe it's just because I've not had that occurrence or situation. I really enjoy working with people, and I actually kind of enjoy the backwards and forwards. And it's like, okay, let's see what they come back with after I say no to this one. As Geoff knows, reviewers are just players that decided they would give up an abundance of their time for no pay and maybe a t-shirt each year. They do it for the passion of the game. They do it because they believe in what geocaching means to them as individuals, what it means to the community. I'm not sure there are situations where you'd be on quote unquote a bad side. I'm guessing there must be, because the question was raised. Reach out, say, are we good? Or that last review might have been a bit intense. I really appreciate what you're doing. That's all that's needed in my mind. And it's just, with people too. The same way as when you accidentally cut that person off when you're driving to the grocery store and then you find you've parked beside them and you kind of do the sup.
Yeah.
Like, we good? Like, reach out. It's we're just all playing the same game. We're all here just to get through each day to enjoy it the best as we can. No one gets out alive, right? So good to go.
Or the CEO can just move to a new part of the country. Says Casey11.
Different reviewers to get our best.
See, I didn't mention bribery once, so I should get extra points for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and having personally been on the side that, I don't know if there was like bad books that I was reading, and I think probably, but having had some difficult conversations with reviewers trying to get caches published in the past, things are good now, I think. but yeah, you come to kind of realize that, like Roy said, they're doing their best. They want to get caches published, and they're human, and they're interpreting things, and in a way they're learning as they go as well. Learning how to deal with people and how to interpret guidelines in ways that probably haven't been interpreted that way before. And so they have to make judgment calls. And like you said, if you don't like it, you can go to appeals. And then if appeals says no, you can blame HQ.
There you
They
go.
put their foot down and say no. But ideally, it's like you come to, if you really want to be out of bad books, for lack of a better term, personally, you try to look at it like from their perspective. If they are seriously trying to do the best job that they can and trying to publish caches, then there's a reason for their decisions. And we have the ability, if we want to try to make the rules for those decisions change if we really want to. But at that point, it's not really the reviewer to blame, because they're trying to interpret the guidelines for the community, for the game, in the best possible way. And there's a lot of things that I used to not agree with that now I'm like, okay, I can understand why. And it's a lot easier to.
Oh, didn't you get old and grow up? Oh, so
it's like a teenager becoming an adult, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, let's recognize that as reviewers, just again, players who are insane enough to give away a bunch of their time, we're human. We screw up. We might say or type the wrong thing. You do have the ability to kick it upstairs, but do it when you actually truly believe that there was an oops. Because if somebody clicks the wrong button on something, stuff happens. But if you just disagree with their opinion on something and you just don't like the way a guideline is written, that's a little different from whether or not you think it was interpreted in the entirely wrong way.
Absolutely.
Because again, if HQ taps a reviewer on the shoulder and says, what were you trying to say here or do here? There might be a moment of clarity where everybody benefits. And that not only benefits the reviewer, but it certainly benefits the player, it benefits the game. But the flip side of that is if you don't like something and you go and ask for an appeal, and the appeal says, well, we kind of agree with the reviewer, that doesn't necessarily mean that the reviewer is evil. It doesn't mean that HQ always agree with them, because I can tell you they do not. It just means at that particular point, maybe there's a different opinion. There's other smileys to be had. There's other fish in the sea. There's other caches to be listed. We're all here to get along and enjoy the game, but we all are working together. And even within the reviewer community, there are situations where we may socially chat about things. We may have differences of opinion on things, topics, whether that be whether we should put butter on our toast before or after. We can never all agree on everything, but the guidelines are there to kind of help us be on maybe the same chapter, and maybe we can work together, be on the same page.
Great. Thank you.
That was profound. Write that down.
Absolutely.
Well, I think we are good to go to move on to our next big segment, which is the Wheel of Challenges. I need to get a sting for that.
We say it every month.
Yeah. This is the time when one live viewer each month will be selected to face off against the Wheel. Have a chance to win the grand prize, which is a 1-year Project GC membership, premium membership. To enter, just send an email to challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com with the subject "Spin Me," followed by your geocaching username in brackets and the answer to the following question. And the first verified user gets the wheel. So we need to have your actual name because your profile will be checked live on Project GC. And the question for this month, if you were listening, or maybe you just already know it, the question is, in what month and year did the Challenge Cache moratorium begin? Not end,
Yes.
begin.
Begin. CacheShadow did a wonderful job of sprinkling that through several times.
It's like verbal pixie dust.
Yeah.
And I know I've forgotten it sometimes and tried to figure out what it is by Googling and searching, and it's not that easy to find. It's out there, but it's not that easy to find.
Are we getting any answers in?
We have we have the first one in with the correct answer is, yes, indeed, April 2015, and that's from Glowworm77.
All right.
Yeah. So that's if there's still anything else coming in, just in case, but we'll see. Oh, okay, so we have Glowworm77 facing off against the wheel. Let's clear that out and spin that wheel. It's so anticlimactic without the ticks.
Without
we need
the
those
tick.
ticks. It's like it's a mental. Oh, just barely on the
Wait,
line.
which one is that one on?
It looks like it's just over the line on the 3-star
Okay.
Marathon Challenge, which is GC6T3JZZZ. I say Z.
Because you're broken.
I was just going to ask Roy, what do you say?
It depends what color it is.
So let's take a look at this challenge. First of all, I'll make a comment that we often get comments wondering why there's so many other features on my browser here. It's because I have browser extensions added. And that includes Project GC's browser extension. There's a map, geocaching map extension, and there's GC Little Helper. So there's 3 different browser extensions I have installed that might add little options onto the basic geocaching.com website. And information about those, because we get asked about that so often, is in the show notes. So after the show airs, you can check the description, and there will be a link to the show notes for you to check out for other information and topics that we've talked about.
And trick out your page.
That's right. This challenge is the LPC Triple Marathon Challenge, 3 difficulty by Terraviators. I can never remember how to say the name.
Terraviators. I have it committed to
Terraviators.
memory. Yeah, because we got it wrong so much.
Yeah, the V. The V is like the syllable there. Terraviators. In Texas. And it is a triple marathon challenge. And the challenge is to find 2 geocaches with a distance of 78.657 miles between the pair.
Wait, is this exact? 78.657?
That would be a much more difficult challenge, I think. Slight distance tolerance with the checker.
Okay.
So this one does have a checker built in. There's a lot of green checks, so it's a good chance. Probably going to qualify. So we loaded it up on Product GC and put in Glowworm 77. Make sure to select it from the list and run the checker. Does she qualify?
Yes!
She qualifies. Awesome, excellent, congratulations. So you have won Project GC 1-year premium membership. Oh, woohoo! That
Congratulations.
means that you get unlimited checks. There's a number of benefits to, especially if you are a Challenge Cache owner, to having a membership at Project GC if you want to verify all of your cache finders stats. So
All
congrats. And we will send that to you ASAP. Our second little giveaway game that we do each month, it's not really a game, but it is kind of a game. It's all part of the game, is to give a congratulatory shout out to listeners who email us proof of qualifying and logging a challenge cache since the last show. And anyone who sends an email to challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com with the GC code having a found it log that, including the photo if you'd like to share, but found during the past month since the last show, will be entered for a prize giveaway for a Challenge Talk Geocoin, which I have.
Looks like our background. Shiny.
Yeah. Yours shows me. Oh, that's not it. That's the leaderboard
My
coin.
leaderboard coin.
I was like, wow, your color is different. There we go.
Your
There
color
it
is
is.
different.
So yes, we'll send you one of those if you are the one that has been randomly chosen. So we have a bunch of submissions, but we like to highlight them. So if we go through 5 that have been submitted. So first of all, we have one in from Zippertiff. It is the Summiting Mount Everest Challenge Cache.
Oh, how
GC.
appropriate for Reach the Peak times.
GC8A4XH. And this one is in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It is at the posted coordinates. It was published 2019, so it's relatively new. And fairly obviously, you have to find a cache at a height or have altitude in excess of 29,029 feet. So if you live in a high altitude area, this is probably not all that hard to accomplish. And I like this right now because during this souvenir promo, it's actually probably pretty easy. If you are going for well, actually no, I'm thinking points and thinking altitude as the souvenir. That's not right. If you reach the peak of all of the souvenirs, you could have just found them all at sea level, so that doesn't work.
It was a good idea.
Yeah,
it worked in my head, and it didn't work when I said it.
Challenge ideas.
So these are always fun because I like going for caches that are actually at high altitudes. You add a little more to the challenge. Whereas if you live in Nevada, you'd probably accomplish that with 100 caches. I can't remember what the altitude is for the caches there, but it's high. And with all of those roadside power trail caches that love them or hate them.
Right.
Next up, we have one from Bloody Cool. It is the Traveler's Challenge of 25 Earth caches. However, there is a trick.
Uh-oh.
Each of those Earth caches must be in a different U.S. state or foreign country. So any region. No Canadian provinces. State, province, or country. That's basically a region. And yeah, so 25 Earth caches, that's a lot of work. These days, well, if you love Earth caches, that's not a lot of work, but that could be. But that's also a challenge to get a cache in at least 25 different regions.
That's a lot of committed travel. Mm-hmm. And then if an Earth cache isn't where you're going in that region, it's even harder.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there is a 3 states, 1 from 5. Okay, so that's, so there's the examples there are just saying how you can combine states, countries.
Okay.
Yeah. At this time, qualify with 32. Oh, yeah, I was just reading details. Okay, so that one was 2019 as well, and that's in Fairfax, in Virginia, by Potato Addict.
Good.
We have another one in from ZipperTiff. This one is, that was GC80RAV. This one is GC74J62. It is the 9x9 DT challenge. Have you completed your fizzy grid?
Is that what that is? A fizzy challenge?
Have you completed this fizzy grid? You have to find all 81 DT grids, but you have to have 9 of each of the listed cache types as well. So it's 9 times 9, but you have to spread out. You can't find 81 traditionals to complete. You have to have 9 of each of these: a virtual, an event, a Warigo, a letterbox, an Earth cache, multi, unknown, and traditional, and a cache type with more than 10 favorite points. Any cache type with more than 10 favorites. So you have to have 9 DTs, 9 different DT combinations of each of those cache types.
Okay.
Which I think would be interesting with an event. Because events can only be difficulty 1.
Right.
Well, okay, this is a lot harder. I just realized that. You have to have
lots
all 9
of terrains
events for an event. Huh. Interesting. I recently just got a 1.5. Oh yes, this was 2017, post-moratorium, and this was. Yeah, when I was in Scotland, I managed to get a 1.5 event, and so I do have a 1.5. I just
nice.
I have to test. I'm so curious. I have to test.
Regional game played.
Well, there's a nice little graphic there. I love it when the challenge checkers have a graphic. Scroll down. You should have a graphic.
Oh yes, these ones.
Yeah.
When they show you the actual icons in the boxes, there are a couple of checkers that do this. As somebody who has a list of challenge caches that I'm working towards, including all these different types of fizzies, this one checker is a really good one to bookmark because it lists off so many different things you could qualify.
Yeah, and what's the GC code for this one?
This is GC74J62.
I think we have inspired people with this one.
Yeah, because the checker for this will give you first the grid for that challenge, but will also show you all of your fizzy grids for all the different types of caches. And I think there's a couple of checkers that even do attributes, maybe specific attributes, not all of them, but I know that, yeah, there's one for finding caches with at least 10 favorite points as well. So it's a great way to look at a variety of fizzy types. Yeah.
I'm really curious. I'm checking too for myself.
Let us know if you qualify. And it only hit me just then, the event.
No.
Online DTs. Oh.
Oh man, there are so many X's on my chart. Good thing you guys can't see it.
Inspiration.
Yes.
So we have coming up next. We also have one from Just Finding Our Way. It's GC4AX5F, and in this one, it is it's a CO by Icon challenge, CO X Icon. But this is a casual. This is
casual.
like a bronze out of a bronze, silver, and gold style tier, and this is one of those point gathering types of caches. So you have certain categories you've got to accomplish to earn points, and then once you earn a certain amount of points, you qualify. In this one, you have to find at least 3 types of caches for per cache owner, and you get points for the more cache types you find from each owner, and you have to have 50 points. So if that sounds confusing, the way to describe it is, you can find two different cache types for one cache owner, but that doesn't get you anything. You have to have at least 3 types per cache owner, and if you have 3, you get 3 points. If you have 4, you get 4 points, I believe. 5 points, and up. So if you were to check this one, you'd probably list all of the cache owners that you've got caches found and the number of cache types for each of those owners, and then add up the number of points to see if you've got 50. I like that little twist on it. It's not.
And
a
when was this
one.
hidden?
This was 2013. Pre-moratorium. And yeah, like it's.
Roy, does something like this make your head hurt?
So go back to the question that said, there are times where you see something where you're like, oh, that's really cool, but I cannot publish it. So my immediate thought when I see this is when a challenge includes block party, HQ, lost and found events, and ape caches, it kind of sets off alarm bells immediately due to this scarcity, right? But when you factor in things like cache owner name, well, now we cannot use those since the 2016 guidelines, but you can see where folks want to include their experiences and other people's experiences in their challenge, and they've included all those different icons. But when you turn around and say to somebody who starts the game today, you get points for this, and this, well, there aren't any block parties scheduled. There's the celebration schedule for next year, but that's a one shot. So it may not be relevant to this specific one because there's other ways to get those points, but it is a case of, I need to really check to see what's going on here. And nowadays it's a little easier because of the way that the new guidelines are written. But previously you could look at this and say, oh yeah, there's a bunch of people who have done it. Well, yes, but there aren't any block parties anymore. That really changes things.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you said something that kind of piqued my attention. You said cache owner names. Do you make a distinction between challenges that are based on the text of cache owner names versus just caches owned by different people? Because this one isn't saying something about specifically the text of cache owner names. It's just saying owned by different people. Yeah,
right there in the not acceptable column, they have all those things. So it's when you can control what's on the cache page, it's a different factor other than difficulty in terrain because it's a different aminal. But if you cannot really, where you place your cache changes the name of where it is. But even then, we saw in July we've changed that alphabetically. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, moving on, we have another one from Bloody Cool, who has sent in GC8D4Q1. It is the Picky Challenge, Hungry 100. You know, we love attribute challenges in Ontario. And this one is another one of those. It is a challenge to find caches with the food nearby attribute. So once you've found at least 100 caches with food, yeah. Did it actually say the name of the attribute here? Foodie stop pit nearby caching. Once you've done that 100 times, per the caches you found, any country as of cache creation, so 175. So, yeah, food nearby, it's got to be in there somewhere. Find yeah. So, there it is. Yeah, 100 food nearby. Let's find out right above the checker. So, simple attribute challenge, but yeah, we have so many of those in Ontario. So one of the things with us, we've got power trails of challenges, and when somebody has an idea that, say, is related to attributes, then it's just a matter of publishing 100 caches, 100 challenge caches, just with a different attribute requirement. And that'll be done, right? So because there's so many attributes, and so we have so many of those out there.
Gotcha.
But I thought that'd be a nice one to.
Well, there's a little point in the chat that I think most of us can ache with. Curious KDB says, I just noticed looking at that 9x9 compared to my paper copy that someone changed their DTs on their multis. So we do work, we track ourselves, and someone somewhere has changed our progress.
Still have to deal with that.
You mean they maintained their cache?
Yeah. So many
Some people would say. Some people would say that challenge listing difficulty and terrain should be locked at published when it's published.
And one of the things to bear in mind is it all is influenced by how long you've played the game. Mm-hmm. Because if you've played the game for 20 years and even if you're a casual cacher, let's say that means you have 500 caches a year. Let's go with that, for example. After a decade, that's a bunch of caches, and you've just magically found all kinds of DTs just by virtue of being out there. And with folks placing caches with difficulty and terrain to suit their needs, it's not as tough nowadays as it was 10 years ago to fill those grids. So just naturally, challenges are less challenging just as time goes on automatically. So those DT changes on caches aren't as impactful as they were 10 years ago. So it was a lot tougher as well. So back when I did my 365 in the days in a row, it was really tough. There weren't as many caches around me. Whereas now there's a power trail. I can go and do one and come home. Go and do another one next day, come home. Go to another one next day and come home. I'm good. I'm set. I'm done. Do it again. It's the game changes the longer the game's around. And that's an example of where you see the impact. Chances are that combination's out there for someone to pick up again.
Yeah. And depending on how active your local community is, chances are if somebody sees a hole or a rarity in a challenge qualifier, they're probably going to go and place a cache. For one, it'll attract a lot of people to it to find it, but it'll also help make challenges at least attainable.
Right.
Because that's the point, right?
So that's it. That's all we've got for showing off some of your finds for this month. Remember to enter for next month. Send in your email before next month's show, and we'll probably highlight the cache if it's interesting and fun. It doesn't have to be interesting or fun to qualify to be put into the draw for the GeoCoin, but yeah, we love to hear creative, especially post-moratorium, creative challenges, how people are interpreting the guidelines and making them fun and attainable, but challenging as well.
Yeah. And if you place a cache and it's found, then it was fun for someone. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what it comes down to. And I will tell you, I enjoy seeing the challenge caches that enter our queue, because it's just an example of the time that people will want to put into the game, because getting the checker written is effort. Those folks that write those checkers, they deserve a huge pat on the back. There's the community does all this work up front, and then the reviewer gets it. That should not be overlooked. So someone took that time to do that effort, and it might need tweaks, but a big, huge thank you to everybody who keeps the game alive and keeps it current and interesting and creative. And that's an awful lot of folks doing challenge caches.
Yeah.
And on that note, the winner of this month's monthly challenge something like that, is
the winner of the coin.
Zipper Tiff.
Yay!
Congratulations.
Congrats.
And once again, if you want to be entered in next month for that Challenge Talk GeoCoin, just make sure that you send us an email to challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com with the GC code and a photo if you want, and your story, and we'll enter it into the draw. One last thing before we close off, I always love to highlight my last challenge I published pre-moratorium, which I believe, Roy, you know it very well, is the Ironman Bingo Challenge.
Oh boy.
This is an example of one of those caches that went through a lot of back and forth before getting published. But it is basically a challenge bingo card of streak qualifiers. And so, for example, for qualifying for B1, you've got to find 25 days of a difficulty 3 and under, or 5 days of abandoned structures, or even 3 consecutive days of scuba caches, which can be super difficult unless you've got either friends who know how to scuba dive, or cache owners who fudge the attributes, or you live in Nevada where the ET highway is all scuba.
Right.
I think it's still that. But it is possible, but if you want to do it legitimately, it's hard. The centerpiece is 100 consecutive days of caching, and impressively, there have been a number of people who have qualified for this. All 25 squares in the bingo grid qualified within 100 consecutive days, which is
awesome.
Nuts.
Yeah.
It's nuts. So I like to highlight this because I am also giving away a coin for anybody who complete. So it's been open to anybody to complete columns and rows and shapes and whatnot. But as a little added bonus incentive, I'm also giving away a coin reward for anybody who simply completes the full card. So if you complete the whole thing, then once I've got my geocoin minted, you'll get one. And for an update for this month, there are 2 new completers from Finland. They have completed the full grid. I don't know. I think he said over a year or so. From Finland, we have Mikko Pit. I have no idea how to pronounce it. And Hulu Juicy. Jesse? Hello, Jesse? I don't know. If you're Finnish, maybe you can inform us how to pronounce.
I think Gary knows. Gary knows. Yeah.
So congrats to those 2 people. You are added to the list of completers, full card completions. Just love to show people and maybe encourage people to try working on that challenge. I know because it's pre-moratorium, I still have not yet qualified for it myself. And that is one of the post-moratorium guidelines. But people have been finding it. So congrats to those 2. And you work on it if you want to. Let me know, post a note. And you might get highlighted on the show as well. And on that note, any other possible clothing thoughts?
Clothing thoughts. Well, Gary says, first of all, Gary says in the chat, I say Holyo Yusi. Holyo Yusi. Holo Yosi. Maybe we're right. But there was a lot in the chat tonight. Thank you very much, yes. Roy. A lot of folks are saying this was very insightful. So thank you for your thoughts, your counter thoughts, and just a behind the scenes look at things. I love behind the scenes stuff.
I made it all up, right?
Because reviewers aren't real.
It is April, yeah. It's great to be here. I'd appreciate the time to be able to be with you folks and everybody who is here in the show today watching and who watches after today as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there are still so many questions out there, and there's always going to be questions and suggestions and comments. So Roy, and I know in our region you're super active. You're really engaged with the community, which is awesome. And you even run a little AMA every. Is it every week or is it every month? I think it's every week. Right?
Every week or so, maybe 2 weeks, I do ask a question, get a possibly relevant or even accurate answer on Facebook, and folks ask me all kinds of questions about reviewing, or they ask me what I have for dinner or my favorite color socks. The premise being is if they do interact, their name gets entered into a draw for some small prize, and it's a lot of fun. And I just try and make sure that I'm approachable and reachable, because again, I'm part of the community as well.
Yeah,
Great.
and it's great to have that, because it shows us that you're human, and you just help to bring the community together. So
Yeah, I can make stuff up wherever I am. Trust me.
And it's not just you, because I know I don't know. Is there any region that only has one reviewer, or is there always at least like a team?
No, there are a few regions that only have one. Even, for example, we look at Nova Scotia's got Cache Viewer now, and we still do work as a team overall. In, I say, most regions, we do talk to each other because we do the same things. We want the same experiences for the players, and we don't all have the answers on our own. We bounce stuff off each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so it's not just you in Ontario. We have. Is it just 2 now, or is there 3?
Ontario is still 3, so we have Cache Drone, Cache Minder, and myself.
Yeah, I don't often see a Cache Minder published, but maybe they do other things. Anyway, yes, it's a teamwork. So thanks to you, and thanks to the team. It's not just you for doing all of your volunteer work.
Right.
And,
yeah, the pay isn't great, but the vacation time is fantastic.
and having to deal with so many people like me. So, again, thank you for joining us and answering all those questions, and thanks to the chat room for being active. We got some great comments and questions.
Yes,
as well.
thank you, everyone.
And as usual, if you do have any other questions or comments or suggestions or feedback, any of those such things, then please do email us at challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com. That's challengetalkpodcast@gmail.com. And we thank you for that. So, little reminders for the next show. It will be October 7th. It's always the first Thursday of the month. So look for that October 7th. Mark that on your calendar. And check back shortly for the show notes. They'll be posted to the description of this show on YouTube and various places. And you'll find links and information related to challenge caching and for tonight, the questions that we raised, CacheShadow.
And for a transcript of today's show, please write down everything we said.
YouTube will do that automatically. But on that note, we will see you next month. And as always, remember, it's all about that challenge accepted, not the numbers or what, something like that.
Right.
I think I did that backwards. So thanks, and we'll see you next month.
Goodbye, everyone.
Have a good night.